Welcome everyone to Meditation Mount. Delighted that you are able to join together today, and we will be exploring a theme called the Doctrine of the Heart. I'd like us to begin as we normally do by taking time to be still, entering into the stillness of the heart, sensing the fire of love that burns at the center of our being, and then connecting heart to heart to heart to heart, to weave together a field of community and communion in which we can share this journey together. So we're in virtual space, different parts of the planet, and yet we are together in the one heart. And also, I believe we're together in this deep desire to create a better world, a more just, more joyful world. So the theme is the doctrine of the heart, but I'd like to begin by sharing what's been happening since our last View from the Mount broadcast, which was on July the 16th, and that was 3 months ago. This was not just a normal summer break. So let me say that life moves in cycles of in-breath and out-breath, and then there are these pauses and periods of stillness between the breaths. And 3 months ago, it became painfully obvious to me after encountering some rather large bumps in the road in my personal life, and also sustaining a serious knee injury. It became really clear I needed to enter a time of introspection, sort of a modern day version of the 40 days in the wilderness experience. I needed to release, reclaim, and recover myself after many years of outer activity. It's really important every now and again to stop, to breathe, to go in. So during this time, I've examined myself carefully from many angles. I've examined my beliefs, the pull of the tides of my feelings, my childhood conditioning, as well as other patterns of behavior that I have acquired on my life journey, as we all do. So this has been a very necessary time just to stop. I also stopped recording podcasts and giving public presentations as I had nothing to say to the world. If you had asked me, Michael, what have you got to say? The only possible message I would have given you was be loving and kind to yourself, to others, and to all beings, good night. It wasn't as though I was withdrawing and refused to be part of anything. It's just that I was in an introspective process where everything was focused internally. It was an in-breath. There was nothing to say outwardly. So I believe it's important for all of us to find those times of silence, because silence is the birthplace of all things. Silence is the place where action issues forth. Silence is also called the synthesis of all sounds, all words. So being in the silence is the perfect place to renew and to start. I often think of silence as a sacred womb out of which all new things are born. So if I wanted to be reborn, I had to enter the silence of my heart, to listen carefully to the song of the soul, and then to find ways of expressing it in a new and different way. So the whole purpose of the process these past few months has been to let go, to recycle, and renew myself. And I'm sure that's not unfamiliar to those of you on the call today or watching the recording. This is something that we all go through. Now, early on in this process, I actually invited my mind to come live inside my heart and learn to see and hear with compassionate eyes, compassionate ears, the compassionate senses of a heart awakened. And that's one of the themes that we'll really be exploring. What does it mean to walk the path, a creedless doctrine of the heart? And by creedless doctrine, I simply mean there are no rules, there are no laws, there are no thou shalts. One lives in the heart and is guided by the heart. So I was recalling, when did I last take a break like this? And there were a couple of instances. The earlier one was back in 1982 while I was living at the Findhorn community in northern Scotland. I won't give you the whole story, I'll condense it. And I'll be using some personal stories today because that's the way of sharing with you how new insights have emerged. So back in 1982, and I'd already been at Findhorn for a number of years, I had been director of education for 4 years. And I somehow sensed that it had become more of an administrative role rather than the original compelling educational call. And while I was visiting the Pacific Northwest to give a series of workshops, I had a stark realization. I actually knew in my bones I needed to recycle myself. So I returned to Findhorn. I resigned, I stepped down from the education branch, and I became a gardener once again because when I came to Findhorn, I joined the garden because I'd been organic farming in Sweden, and that was something that was close to my heart. I became a gardener, and I was blessed with the responsibility of actually tending the original vegetable garden at Findhorn that gave the community pretty worldwide fame and recognition because of the experiment in cooperation between the humans, the devas or angels, and the forces of nature, the elemental beings. It was an experiment to see, can we cooperate with the whole of life to create not just a garden, but a whole new society? So it wasn't just about growing vegetables. It was about how we cooperate with the different aspects of the planet, the different levels and dimensions of consciousness. And so I entered the garden. I announced that until further notice, I would not be offering workshops or speaking publicly, and I would be totally immersed inside the daily experience of caring for the land. It was the absolute right decision. And then out of that 2-year hands-on period in the garden, I re-emerged with a new sense of life, a new sense of meaning and belonging, not just about my place, but our place in the greater scheme of things. I wasn't filled with concepts. I hadn't been reading. I'd been working not just on the land, I'd been working in the land, as the land. So I'd like to show you an image now that reflects this need to go through this process. I've called it the pageant of life. And as you can see here, it says, in the continuous pageant of life, through the cyclical procession of the seasons, the angel of endings always precedes the spirit of regeneration, so that truth, goodness, and beauty may be born anew and more radiantly revealed at every turn of the spiral. Appearance, disappearance, reappearance. Such is the generative nature of emergence and the emergent process. So I just want to put that there as a reminder, because in our society, if you don't just keep going up on this steep incline, which is how we measure success, everything has to get bigger and better all the time. If we don't understand there are times to let go and recycle, we are not living in rhythm and harmony with nature. And the ageless wisdom teaching underscores that the death of form always precedes the regeneration of the form life. So when I entered the garden at Findhorn, not everybody understood this principle. And several of my friends visited me while I was gardening and offered their condolences at my seeming social demise and death. I know it may sound strange, but here were people who thought I'd undergone a loss of status, a fall from grace because I had shifted from being director of education, which was a public, prominent position, but it was still part of a community. And now I was in a life of being a simple gardener. So I had to say, look, it's okay. This was a conscious choice. I consciously recycled myself. I need to compost the old forms and allow something new to emerge. And there's no other way I know of doing that other than to let go and to surrender. And that's part of what I would like to explore with you. So that was from 1982. The last time this type of interlude occurred was actually in 2005. So that was 18 years ago, at the time when I officially retired from the corporate world. I remember writing a letter to friends and colleagues announcing that I was taking a 6-month period to let go and listen. That was the sort of the subject line. Michael is letting go and listening. And would they kindly not send me any job offers? Because I was not looking for another job, but listening deeply in the silence for what was next in my life. And that reframing really helped. I'm not looking for another position, another job. I'm seeking for something new to emerge. So it was in the same spirit of natural death and rebirth that I entered this time of in-breath and introspection 3 months ago. So that's a little bit of the background of what I'm going to share coming out of this. One of the biggest problems with beliefs, I now understand, is that we actually believe them to be true. We believe them to be infallible. Because I believe it, it must be true. I know I've succumbed to that temptation. And now I'm understanding beliefs are more like the current interpretation and approximation of the truth that's been passed through the lens of my being, which has been conditioned by my chemistry, astrological chemistry, emotional chemistry, conditioned by my upbringing, my other biases and preferences. Nothing in this is wrong. It just means that my belief is not the whole truth. And so I then took that a step further and said, what if one of the challenges of treading the spiritual path is learning how best to embrace a belief and be guided by a chosen doctrine without inadvertently becoming indoctrinated in the process? So I asked myself, how do we avoid becoming prisoners of our own mental constructs and adopted beliefs? And that's really what I'd like to explore for the next while here with you. I've used beliefs and doctrines as guidelines, and sometimes those guidelines become life rafts and I hold on to them, I cling on to them, and rather than guiding me, I am afraid to let go of them in case I lose my sense of reality. So I believe that each of us is being invited to walk that upper middle path where we are supported by the wisdom of the ages, and yet in the end, we must be self-reliant and we must stand solely in the strength of our own sovereignty. And in fact, this was the theme of the Buddha's last sermon. So let's begin our inquiry into what it means to follow a practice and a program of inner development without becoming programmed by any set of beliefs that we may have adopted. And I'm trusting that this will then naturally lead us into a reflection of the opportunities and the implications of that powerful path and process called the Doctrine of the Heart, which is the title, which is the theme of today. So it may be valuable to actually revisit the Buddha's last sermon as a starting point. So I've compiled a distillation. It's not the whole thing. And I will read it and we can ponder it together. Herein, O Ananda, let a brother, as he dwells in the body, so regard the body that he, being strenuous, thoughtful, and mindful, may, whilst in the world, overcome the grief which arises from the body's cravings. While subject to sensations, let him continue so to regard the sensations that he, being strenuous, thoughtful, and mindful, may, whilst in the world, overcome the grief which arises from the sensations. And so also When he thinks or reasons or feels, let him so regard his thought that, being strenuous, thoughtful, and mindful, he may, whilst in the world, overcome the grief which arises from the craving due to ideas or to reasoning or to feeling. So I'm going to show 3 images now. So it's like the second slide. Those who, either now or after I am dead, shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and seeking their salvation in the truth alone, shall not look for assistance to anyone besides themselves. It is they, Ananda, among my bhikshus, who shall reach the very topmost height, but they must be anxious to learn. My age is now full ripe. My life draws to a close. I leave you. I depart, relying on myself alone. Be earnest then, O brethren, holy, full of thought. And then this is the conclusion of the distillation. Be steadfast in resolve. Keep watch o'er your own hearts. Who wearies not, but holds fast to his truth and law, shall cross this sea of life and shall make an end of grief. When the light of gnosis has dispelled the darkness of ignorance, when all existence has been seen as without substance, peace ensues when life draws to an end, which seems to cure a long sickness at last. Everything, whether stationary or movable, is bound to perish in the end. Be ye therefore mindful and vigilant. The time for my entry into nirvana has now arrived. These are my last words. I find that very powerful, and this year in particular, when I reread it, because it's normally read at the time of the Gemini full moon, it was that part in the middle that got me. Those who either now or after I'm dead shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp. It was the whole thing of, we've got to go through the passage alone. Even though there is help all around, there is support, but the actual journey through the wormhole, the journey from the caterpillar to the butterfly, whatever you want to call it, that journey we have to do by ourselves, through our own making, because we have to prove, not prove in a showy way, but we have to show that we have the capacity and the skill to give birth to something inside ourselves without any external crutches. So this was a passage that I've been reflecting on a lot. So what does it mean to go through the passage alone without external existence? That was the question. Because here in the age of Aquarius, we're talking about the cultivation of group consciousness. And here at Meditation Mount, there's a particular pathway called group endeavor. Well, if it's group endeavor, why have I got to go through it alone? And here's what I reflected on, and here's my take on this. Once again, as I normally say, don't believe a word I say in these broadcasts. Just if it resonates, take it in. The main thing is that each of us go on our own journey, and then we can compare field notes, and then we can join together our collective wisdom that comes out of our own experience. So this is when I look at the larger picture, if you like, the cosmic picture. If each of us is a fractal of the one life, and that this all-embracing consciousness that we call the one life is seeking to realize itself through its many parts, then each of us is an outpost of its being, of its beingness. Each one of us is a portal through which the one life enters into the densified realms of time and space. Therefore, in order for the one to be self-realized, the parts of the one, the many parts of the one, have to go through the process of self-realization. And as we go through that passage and we enter into a new awareness, the light of a new day and the dawning of wisdom, that self-realization brings us into a greater awareness and an expansion of the identification of self. It's the I to the we to the planet to the solar system. But we can't jump ahead conceptually. We have to grow into it organically. So my take is what the Buddha was saying is, in order for wisdom to show up in every person, this state of consciousness needs to be born from within and not adopted from outside as a belief. So I believe wisdom resides inside the heart awakened. And so the doctrine or path of the heart, which I named, is that which allows the one to know itself and to express itself through the many, and then the many to know that they are the one. We come full spiral. I mean, that's my take. That's one way of looking at it. Also, when I was reflecting on the Ageless Wisdom teaching, there was a phrase called isolated unity. It's a stage of our spiritual growth where we are asked to stand alone. Just the Buddha said, stand alone by relying on yourself. And self-reliant doesn't mean you don't want help from anyone. It just means in order to go through the passageway, you have to go through it naked, alone. So this isolated unity is really like a birth canal. We have to go through the birth canal to deliver on the promise of who we are, to reveal the truth of our inner nature. And in a strange way, as we do this, we're not only the child that's being born, we're the parents, and we're also the midwife. So we're the whole thing. I believe it's a profound insight that when we succeed in something, it's internalized. It becomes part of who we are. Not as a badge to wear, to show to others, but it's an internalized capacity, an internalized quality. So the Buddha and Buddhahood is an internalized and externalized quality of love and wisdom, of compassion, loving kindness, whatever you want to call it. So the theme of this broadcast today, as you probably picked up, is facing this challenge of treading the spiritual path without becoming indoctrinated in the process. So let's shine the light on us here at Meditation Mount then. What about all of us who are part of Meditation Mount? What about the content of this broadcast even? Am I and are we unwittingly indoctrinating others by having them believe in something just because we follow a particular tradition and path of spiritual inquiry and believe it to be true, quote unquote? So let me unwrap this one, because it's a question I have to go through and a reflection that is needed so that we don't assume that we're outside of this inquiry. So for clarification, our lineage is the Trans-Himalayan mystery tradition. It's the teachings that came out of this era and this part of the world that also gave expression to theosophy. They gave expression to the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, Krishnamurti. Out of this great stream of teaching, there were many tributaries, and they're all connected. However, all of them have different roles and different missions to fulfill. So even though Meditation Mount comes from this long and rich heritage of esoteric teaching, what we seek to offer are practices that will awaken the soul and allow each person to live from a place of deep authenticity, to give birth to the truth of who you are on your terms. So for those of you who visit us in person here at Meditation Mount in the Ojai Valley, or even online as we're doing right now, we like to describe the Mount as a sanctuary for the soul. And what that means is that we have consecrated a space filled with stillness, natural beauty, where the invitation is to deepen your relationship with your essential nature. We're not inviting you to believe in anything except one belief. I guess it could be called a belief. It's believe in your own essential divinity. Believe that inside of you is a spark of the Creator. If you are part of creation, therefore the Creator lives in you and you live in the Creator. So we really support the awakening and expression of the essential nature of who we are as humans. And we seek to assist the creation of a society built on a set of universal principles that will benefit the good of the whole. That's our mission, and we're doing our best to fulfill it. Rather than giving lots of lectures on the esoteric philosophy, which I find incredibly useful to paint a picture and place everything into a useful context. But I believe the real need in the world is, this is crisis time, this is crunch time, all souls on deck. Therefore, the souls have to waken up. We have to waken up. And so let me just go over the principles that we work with here at Meditation Mount, because I want to show how these principles don't necessarily dive down into sets of beliefs you have to believe in, although they're presented as very powerful possibilities. So the three principles are the principle of essential divinity, which I talked about, which is inside of each aspect of creation. Inside of you, inside of me, is a spark of the Creator. Therefore, you and I are essentially divine. We're sacred beings. We deserve respect. And we need to respect each other and all of life, because we are fractals of the one life. When I meet you, I meet another aspect of divinity, even though you may look different, talk differently. We are different aspects of the one. And then the principle of goodwill that says love is at the heart of everything. Goodwill is the natural urge of the soul to love and give and benefit the good of the whole. It's a natural urge. And therefore, love then becomes the currency of all relationship. It's the enrichment of relationship. It's also the glue that holds everything together. And then the third principle is called unanimity, which affirms that we're part of one coherent field, one interdependent ecosystem, and that whatever I do to myself or do to you, or you do to me, or you do to anyone else, we are all touched by that. Because we're all threads in this amazing matrix. Now, these principles don't just happen by themselves. Essential divinity doesn't just happen because I say I'm divine. We have to work on it. That's the whole thing of being incarnated. We have to give the word flesh. We have to make it happen. And so the way that we live into the principle of essential divinity is by following a pathway that we call spiritual approach. And that's any line of inquiry. It could be philosophical, it could be musical, it could be religious, it could be scientific. It's any line of approach that leads us deeper into a sense of who we are. And then if we're going to experience what love means, there is a pathway called right human relations. And that allows us to experience what it's like to relate one aspect of creation to another. Not just among humans, but how we relate to the rocks, the insects, the birds, the plants, the invisible realms. So right human relations is the connectivity, how we honor and express the connectivity that exists. And when we do that, then we sense the love that lies behind all creation. That's my sense. And then finally, there's the pathway of group endeavor, which offers us a lived experience of unanimity. If life is interconnected and interrelated, then what better way to discover that and to feel that in our bones than to work together and not work in isolation, which is why many of us are drawn to community. So let me take a breath here, because I want to just slightly shift and carry on down this path with you. I hope it's not too much, too quickly. I'm simply sharing what's on my heart at the moment. I would say that every doctrine has both its strengths and its limitations. I'm aware of many groups who have been organized around a system of beliefs that then at some point cross the line and they become cults. So what do I mean by a cult? In a cult, I've noticed that the leader becomes the sun around whom all the satellite members revolve. They pay homage to the sun. They do whatever the sun says because the sun is bright and they only reflect the light of the sun. And we've learned from those who in recent years have managed to escape some of these cults and tell their story, just how harrowing it is and how distorted it can get when this starts to be self-centered. It starts to be, rather than a constellation of souls seeking together, it becomes a person around whom people gather. I'm going to take a drink of water. This is thirsty work. Thank you. I hope you're staying hydrated. When I used to do trail running, I had a headband that said hydrate or die. And it wasn't alarmist, it was a reminder. You have to drink. Okay, thank you. So let me just double click on this one. A friend of mine back in the 1980s was associated with an Indian guru who had come to the West, who had a benevolent message to offer and had gathered many, many people around him. And yet, the organizational culture began to be very restrictive, constricting. And my friend felt that it was time to leave the group. And when she did so, the immune system kicked in, and it didn't really want to let her go. And it was telling her why she shouldn't leave, try to ostracize her. Now, she had become a very close co-worker of the guru. She was, in fact, his photographer. And so leaving had to be done under the cover of darkness and secrecy. It got to that. So she managed to leave. And then her former friends in the organization were told by the senior disciples that she was a persona non grata. She basically didn't exist anymore, a non-person. She shouldn't be contacted, acknowledged, or helped in any way. I'm not condemning this, I'm just saying how easy it is for any organization that seeks to gather around the truth to become isolated and believe that it has the way, and either you stay or you leave, and if you leave, that's it. It reminds me of the phrase, if you're not with us, then you must be against us. Unfortunately, this either-or scenario is prevalent at the moment in our society. And in an either-or scenario, there are only polarized options. Either believe in us or you're the enemy. If you're part of this political party, I don't agree with you. I'm here to defeat you. Or if it's a religious war, you're my enemy. We haven't understood that we are all aspects of the one life. So when the collective mind of any organization becomes dogmatic and fanatical, it can only see these two ways forward. I want to say that for me, the doctrine of the heart is a different approach. The heart is always open to finding ways where the many paths can converge and where these many paths can create a deeper sense of unity in service to the common good and the general welfare. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. We have to work at it. We have to practice. And what do we practice? We practice what opens the heart, which is loving kindness, compassion, caring. And I know a number of people have said to me, well, that's unreal. You know, how can everyone just start loving each other? I said, well, maybe one day at a time. And how about, here's a challenge for you. If you don't believe the power of loving kindness, test it out for a day. Do your best to be loving and kind to every person you meet. And then, without saying to anyone that you're trying to be loving and kind, just go quietly about your business. And at the end of the day, just see, how did it feel? And then the next day, if you dare to, do it again. And then it may be that after a while, you see the effects, you see the results of living a life of loving kindness. And you realize that is your contribution to the world. It's also how you live an authentic life. So what I've given you with this friend of mine in this particular cult is an extreme example of indoctrination, I believe, because it leads to the loss of personal freedom. But let me give you a personal example from my background. As I said, I'm going to share a few stories, more than I normally do, because I've been doing a lot of personal reflection. Therefore, these stories have come alive again. So I was brought up in the south of England in a Christian household. My mother was a Sunday school teacher. My father served at the altar. You know, he trained me. We regularly attended church. And at church, we were told many things. And the things that I remember that really blocked me were that we were sinners. I couldn't believe that. Really, we're sinners? We're born sinners? Wow. Bad luck, huh? And then also, we weren't worthy. And the phrase from the Bible, I think, was, or the catechism or whatever it was, we weren't worthy to eat the crumbs that fell from the master's table. So unlike the principles that we espouse here at Meditation Mount, I was not told that God lived inside me, essential divinity. I was not told that this seed of Godhood, this enfolded reality, is my essence, and that the whole purpose of my life is to unfold the enfolded promise of who I am together with others. So I was imprinted with certain stories that I found limiting later on. So my religious experience of growing up was that the world was a courtroom that would come to an end at Judgment Day. And as a sinner, there was only one way to be saved. And I believe this is what we're facing at the moment. Judgment Day, people looking at the end times and judging others and realizing that the hell we've created, in fact, is a product of our own choice, our own unskilled actions. So if life is not a courtroom, it must be a classroom. So for me, these two things go hand in hand. If it's a courtroom, I'm sitting in judgment of others and others are sitting in judgment of me. In a classroom, the development of personal wisdom and the activation of the fire of love is what happens when we tread the path of the heart, because the path of the heart and the fire of love is the salvation. I mean, I may sound like a religious preacher at the moment, but I've noticed, because I've listened to many friends who come from different denominations of Christianity, because as you know, Christianity is full of many variations on a theme. And I'll tell you one more story. This was brought home to me about 20 years ago while I was working on a project at the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. I was working on the NASA shuttle project through one of the companies that was building the main engines for the shuttle. And so I had to go to the Stennis Space Center, and the commute from my hotel on the Gulf Coast was 40 minutes along I-10. And so I would listen to FM radio. I'd listen to music stations because they had some good music. And then one day I thought, I'm going to switch to the AM band. And I did that. And immediately I was assailed by this strident voice that was proclaiming, "All you sinners will burn in hell for eternity unless you repent." And I went, "What? All you sinners will burn in hell for eternity unless you repent." And I was surprised because I wasn't sure, is this like a Monty Python sketch? Is this Mississippi's version of Monty Python? And then I realized, no, this is real. This person actually believes what they're saying. And it was a presentation of another courtroom scenario where the preacher was telling us the only way to commute my death sentence and to escape from the prospect of incarceration in hell for eternity as a sinner was to repent. And so, without saying he was wrong, I'm saying it conditions. If I believe that, then I'm conditioned in a certain way. I happen to believe that hellfire means something slightly different. And this resonated when I came across one of the ancient mystics, someone called Isaac of Nineveh. And his understanding of the fire of hell was hellfire is the fire of God's love that's here to seek to help us purify and transform our lives. So it's not a punishment. We're not put in hellfire to burn and to be punished. Hellfire is a gift from the Creator to aid us on the journey of self-realization and awakening. And that resonated with me. So burning in hell inside this context actually is an educational aid to growth in the classroom. It's not a punishment for sinning. And then I believe that the root meaning of sin, in fact, is separation. So we sin when we separate. So at the moment, when we separate ourselves from each other, when we allow hatred to come between us, when we see each other as the enemy, that is a real sin, because sin is separation. And so how do we redeem our sins? We reconnect with each other. We reconnect with our inner source of essential divinity. We reconnect with beauty, with goodness, with everything that is of the soul. And in this way, we can find a deeper dimension of meaning and belonging together. And many religious and spiritual paths seek to offer this, but they don't always allow for the coming together of the paths. So for me, the doctrine of the heart is actually a path that heals this disconnect of separation, and it reconnects us with life and offers us a way to deepen our sense of meaning and belonging in the greater scheme of things. Why do I feel this? Well, because the heart doesn't tell me what to think. My experience is the heart invites us to release all previous projections, allow this promise, this seed identity of who we are to quicken and flourish and flower, and to be born from the inside out. So for me, the path of the heart contains the innate wisdom of how best to respond to the call of life and to grow the requisite skills of living an authentic life. An authentic life means something that is in integrity with my deep identity. So what my intent is now, each day, is to live in integrity with myself, not to follow a belief, but to live in integrity with myself, whatever that means. And the way you know that is by feeling into it. If you're off center, you feel it. When you're in resonance with something, you feel it. When everything is co-resonant, it has structural integrity. We talk about buildings having structural integrity. What does it mean to have structural integrity in your own life? That's what I'm asking myself. So I go back to this whole thing of, I believe we're incarnated on earth to learn, to grow, and to serve together. Therefore, we're living inside a classroom. And yet, as I've just illustrated, many people and many situations around the world show that many of us treat earth as a courtroom rather than a classroom. So very, very briefly, as I begin to wrap this up, So if, Michael, what's the difference between a courtroom and a classroom? And this is something that I used in the corporate world that I still use in my own personal life. In a courtroom, we ask three questions. What happened? Who is guilty or at fault? And how shall they be punished? However, in a classroom, we also ask three questions. And the first one's the same. What happened? The second one is different. What did we learn? And the third one wraps it up by saying, how will we act differently now as a result of this learning opportunity? So, do we wish to live and grow together in the classroom? Or are we going to be part of the courtroom, which is now meting out justice? It's been weaponized. We have militaries that mete out justice, perceived justice. So let me go back to the heart, because this is what I want to end with, the doctrine of the heart. When I reflect on this magnificent organ that we have at the center of our being, for me, the heart is a multidimensional organ of consciousness, compassion, connection. When I look at the physical heart, it pumps and circulates the life-giving blood around my ecosystem of self. It keeps me alive. It pumps, it pulses. And then I know in my heart, when I'm suffering, I can put the pain inside my heart. It's like a recycling unit. It helps to transform the pain. And we know that eventually, once we've gone through the forgiveness and the deep understanding of the cause of pain and suffering, it will be transmuted as part of this alchemical process into the gold of wisdom and joy. So therefore, the heart holds all pain, but it also holds all hopes and dreams. It holds the aspirations of our humanity. It holds the seeds of a more just and joyful future. And then when I reflect on the heart, it connects each of us through lighted lines of love. Heart to heart, hearts across distance. It's what we have in common, the one heart. And yet this one heart also connects with deeper dimensions, with all of creation. So I believe through the doctrine of the heart, or by walking the path of the heart, the broken or the shredded matrix of our one humanity can be rewoven with these strands of love. And through the magnet of the heart, we will be brought into resonant rapport with the heart of the cosmos. The heart of the cosmos is the place where the one and the many can reunite. So I know I've said a lot of things, I've shared a lot of things on my heart, but just one more sentence to complete this. I believe that if we choose to follow the doctrine and the call of the heart, it is in fact the next and natural way for us to create a more perfect union at all levels of being and doing together on this planet. And my earnest prayer is that we live from the heart, we live lives of loving kindness, and that this becomes the way in which we relate, not only to ourselves and each other, but to all beings that call this planet home, those that are visible and those that are invisible to our eyes. So thank you for this time together, for this journey. And I'm assuming we'll see each other in a month's time. Who knows what the world will be doing and where we will be in a month. And so let us hold in our heart the immense pain that is happening around the world at this time. People in strife. And at the same time, let's hold the vision of hope in our hearts. Because that is what we're being asked to grow together. A more perfect union. Thank you, and blessings from all of us here at Meditation Now. Namaste.